Hi, pretty little lifters. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm going to be chatting with guest Jarvina Routt. Jarvina is a fellow born and raised Southern Californian, and she's an athlete, a wife, and a mama. We actually met at a brand photo shoot that we were both invited to be a part of. And at the shoot, she shared with me that she participated in Highland Games. And honestly, I didn't totally know what that entailed. And she told me she was a competitive thrower. And me being somebody who loves strength, I was so intrigued with how she had to train for this and how she got into this sport. So I wanted Jarvina to come talk with me to share with you about her sport and how she got into it. So let's welcome Jarvina to the podcast. All right, welcome to the podcast, Jarvina.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start by having you do a little brief intro, and give us like a snapshot of like who you are, where you're from, and what you are up to professionally.
Yeah, well, I am a professional Highland Games athlete. I also dabble in strongman, grip training, powerlifting. If it's heavy, I'm gonna try to lift and or throw it. So,
Yes.
yeah,
I like that. I feel like that's the perfect summary. Like if it's heavy, like I'm going to be there. Like you're going to see me doing something with it.
yeah, count me in.
I love that. And you are also from Southern California, correct?
Yep, yep, SoCal gal.
Love it. So you and I met at a girl athletic apparel photo shoot, and that was such a fun shoot. And we got to shoot at CrossFit Athletes Jamie Hagaya's gym. And then we also got to shoot at the beach. But I think one of my favorite things about that shoot was like, I feel like they did a good job of having people from like different types of fitness and like different walks of life. Like I was a teacher who does fitness. And then when I met you and you were like, oh yeah, I do Highland Games, I was like, what are Highland Games? Like I had no idea what this was, and it piqued my interest. I was like, excuse me, tell me more. So I would love for you to share this with everyone. Like, what are Highland Games? Like, how did you get into this? Was throwing something you did previously? Give us the tea on this, because this was new to me. I remember going to look it up, and I looked at your Instagram. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Highland Games I guess we would consider it like a niche sport. Like it's big within itself. So if you're part of the community, then it's like, oh yeah, there's a Highland Games everywhere. Like every weekend, somewhere across the country, there's a festival going on. As far as like what it consists of, it's like track and field throws. If you're familiar with like shot put, discus in college, they throw hammer and javelin. So basically, those like throwing events kind of came from Highland Games. Like, so instead of throwing shot puts, we throw stones, like literal rocks. And like, we can't pick and choose which events, if we like an event best, we have to consistently be good at all 9 events. And
Oh my
it's more of
gosh.
like a throwing decathlon. So
Wow.
yeah, it's not just strength, it's endurance. Like just this past weekend, I was on the mic, I was emceeing the San Diego Highland Games, and it was funny to see like some of these guys are just big and they're strong, and they come out and they're like, yeah, and it was like second to the last events, and they were just like, I'm done, and I'm like, no, you gotta stick it out, you gotta push through. So yeah, it's not just strength, it's actually like endurance too, because we have very long days doing 2 stones. We throw a heavy and a lightweight, 2 Scottish hammers, so a heavy and a light Scottish hammer. We do height events, so we take like for the women, it's a 28-pound weight, and we throw it over a bar, kind of like high jump and pole vault. So if you clear the height,
Wow.
then we move up. Yeah. And then, of course, the most famous event is the caber toss, which is
Oh
basically
my
like
gosh.
flipping a tree trunk. Yeah.
Okay. So I saw this one on your Instagram, and I was like, excuse me? Like it was just this giant like log tree trunk. And I was like, this is wild. I was like, how does one train for this?
Well, with caber, I guess as far as like training for it, like in the weight room, it's like a lot of triple extension, a lot of explosive movements. I think a lot of
Mm.
people come about throwing, or if they're coming from like a powerlifting background, or just very like static strength, they have a more difficult time kind of transferring that over because throwing is very explosive. So like if you think of like a power clean or a snatch to get it up,
Yeah,
it's
that's what I was
it's
thinking. I
full
was like,
triple.
ooh, triple
Yeah,
extension.
exactly. Yeah. So it's I'm able to coach like lifters that are familiar with like that term, triple extension, like, oh, getting your hips into the finish. And so training in the weight room, you want to do a lot of that explosive movement. But as far as like training specifically for caber, you got to get your hands on a caber because it's such it's a fill event. It's one
Yeah.
thing to be strong, but if you don't know like the timing and the technique of, when to establish your run, when to establish the pull. And when I say the pull, that means like going to, set up, squat, and hit that triple extension to try to flip it because it's the only event it's not for distance, it's not for height, it's for accuracy. So the athletes
Mm.
were trying to flip it end over end and land it perfectly in front of us. So on a clock face score, if it lands perfectly in front of us, it's 12 o'clock. If it's a little bit to the right, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, the other way, 11, 10, and so on. Um, the crowds absolutely go insane when you get a flip. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's really exciting.
So, what's funny? One of my coworkers is really into a lot of these events, and like goes to like the Renaissance Fair and like all these different things. And she was saying she went someplace recently where she's like, oh, I went somewhere this weekend and they were doing a Highland Games competition. And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, I know somebody who competes in that. And I feel like it was one that you were at. Because I had pulled up your Instagram and she's like, oh my God, yes, this was the woman. And I was like, and I was like low key jealous. I was like, that is so cool. You got to see her do her thing.
I'm like, I wonder if it
That
was
is
in
so
Phoenix.
fun. So yeah, but I was just like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome. So when I like full disclosure, like once I kind of learned about what the Highland Games are, to be honest with you, I thought it was just a sports for men. Like I did not realize that women were participating in this sport just based on like my knowledge, the little knowledge that I had in this. So what is it? Has it always been like women were always a part of this? Like what is it like diversity wise in terms of women, and then also just like BIPOC in the space? Like this is, I just think of like Scotland or like I don't know. Like I'm telling you, I know
Yeah, for
nothing.
sure.
So I need education on this and what is it like being in that space?
Oh yeah, it's definitely come a long way. I mean, I started my first ever competition was in 2015. And yeah, I mean, those thoughts did go through my head because even though I'm coming from a track and field background, I just always knew kind of what Highland Games was as far as what it meant culturally, but I didn't realize it was that much of like a competitive sport where I mean, people compete in Highland Games all over the world. Like there are teams. I have
Wow.
like followers from like Germany, and like
Wow.
from France and stuff. So it's in Australia, like it's everywhere now, just like any other sport. But of course, like I've learned the women that came before me, um, that there weren't implements tailored for women. So like if women want to jump in,
Mm,
they're jumping in with the men, they're throwing the same weights, and there wasn't a specific class to tailor towards
yeah.
women. Yeah, so by the time I came along, I mean over here in the States, we have classes for everyone from,
Cool.
your skill level, age level, even weight. We have a lightweight class. There's a lightweight open, there's lightweight masters. Like, we're very spoiled over here because when I went to Scotland in 2018 and 2019, it was like not familiar out there for women. Like, yeah, some women had came out and do it, but they didn't realize, oh, we're doing it at the level that we do it at. Like the crowd, I guess they
Oh.
just didn't know what to expect. And so the particular festival we went to the first um, day that we were out just kind of visiting, uh, they were like, well, you can demo whatever event you want to demo, right? And so I was like, all right, I my favorite events are weights. So I grabbed a
Uh-huh.
weight and like I threw it, and it was the first time, like, because I'm so used to throwing here. It's like as soon as the weight's out of my hand, people are like, it's loud, but it was like a dead silence before they absolutely started like going crazy. I think they were just like, "Wait, what?"
Like,
And
what's happening?
like,
We've never seen this.
yeah, they did it. And I was in Dornoch, Scotland, right? Because the games that I was out there to compete in, like they were working with us, so they had our implements. They were already like ready and excited that they were going to have, women throwers. So the other place, they were just like, "Wait, what? What?" Like, um, so it's definitely growing. Even across over there. Like I just saw a games posted that they're highlighting like a women's championship in Scotland, and everyone was like, "Oh,
Wow.
like it's happening," like it's finally
That
like,
is awesome.
yeah, becoming the norm that we're out here, and it's not just about just holding that space for us, but it's having that space because we're doing some big things, you know,
Yeah.
within
That's
our classes.
I love that because yeah, like I said, I had this kind of preconceived notion that like I feel like I just thought of like white men from Scotland. That is
Oh yeah,
literally like what I,
definitely. I mean,
you know?
yeah, no, definitely. That's what it is culturally. And like I have the biggest amount of respect for it. That was one thing is like, hey, I'm coming into this like, so I feel like there's two ways that people view coming into Highland Games, like especially as an athlete, right? So a lot of us are recruited like from track and field. And that's how I got
Oh,
into it.
cool.
Yeah. My
Yeah.
husband's good friend was at a festival and he was watching the athletes and it just like clicked for him. And he called my husband and he's like, "Hey, Jarvina would be great at this." And I was like,
Oh my
"Wait, what?"
gosh.
Yeah. And I was like,
You're
"I
like,
don't
what is
know."
this?
Yeah. I was like, let me do my research because, I just want to be respectful of,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like, do you have to have like, you know, um,
Like
part of
roots, like
like,
Scottish roots
yeah,
or
like
like,
Scottish roots or
yeah.
anything like that. So, but what's funny is after getting into this, my husband was all like hyped and he was like, "Let's do our DNA stuff." And I'm just like, "All right, whatever." But then it turned out that I actually am.
Oh my gosh. It was destiny. It was in your
Yeah,
blood. It
I was
was
like,
meant for you.
"Oh, so yeah." So I was like, "That's pretty funny." And I don't mind being that example for people because like,
Yeah.
I do expect like some ignorance here and there, but as far as like within the sport and I say like my family, like I mean, when you're at a festival, there's a lot going on. There's the pipe bands, there's dancers, there's performers, whiskey tasting, but it just seems like everybody has, their thing. And as athletes, we're
Yeah.
competing all day. We're part of the entertainment of the festival. So like
Yeah.
the athletics part of it, like it just feels like family. So
Yeah.
within that community, I haven't felt any type of ignorance come my way or, like people do recognize me as a black woman out here, um, competing in this sport, but I think they also just see me like that's Jarvina Routt, and they show me so much love and respect that it keeps bringing me back.
Yeah.
But as far as how it came about culturally, I did look into it, and as far as like the families and the clans and people hold so much pride, like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm Clan Ross or Clan McDonald, and it's just that, and like when I got into
Yeah.
it, my maiden name is McLean, but I was just like, I mean, I don't know, as a black woman, I don't know how that last name got there, so I didn't, take it too seriously. Plus, I used my married last name because my sister also competes. So I was like, we can be,
Oh
different
my
in
gosh,
it.
I love that your
Yeah.
sister does it too. Oh my gosh, it's
Yeah.
so in your family. I love this. And you know what? I love hearing you talk about like also that like you took the time to like explore the cultural roots of it and like get to know like what is this? Like what am I getting into? And I think that's really cool because I think there is that element to it too. Like you said, like you're like, I want to be respectful, but like this is cool and it's opening up to new people. Like you were saying, it's all over the world now. And I think that is so interesting and really cool to see how far something can come that's like a cultural event and like expand. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think just with social media now, being able to connect with like so many people and like I said, followers in Germany and France and like everywhere. And I think the networking is what's making it like grow even more because I saw this
Yeah.
competition in Germany and I was like, that looks so much fun. And the guy's like, hey, you need to come out next year. And I'm like, that would be cool, you know? I want to
Yes.
get out everywhere and just
Yeah.
um yeah, it's just I get really excited talking about Highland Games just because like I'm just so passionate and I love it so much and like um it just Scotland itself, like being there, if I can live anywhere else in this on this planet, it would be Scotland because it's just it's not even like a out of the way uncomfortable friendliness as an American, you know, like but it was
Yeah.
just like everybody's just calm and everybody's just kind of focused on their own day, you know.
Yeah.
My first night at a pub and we're just hanging out and people are being friendly, like, oh, you know, where about to be from? And I'm like, oh, you know, I'm from the States. I'm here to compete in Highland Games. And everyone's first like questions like, oh, you're a dancer? No, I'm an athlete.
You're like, actually,
Yeah.
actually. Oh, how
Yeah.
funny.
I'm like, no, I'm not a Scottish dancer. I actually I you know, I toss cabers and I throw stuff and it just you can see it in their minds are like
Yeah.
blown and I show them, you know, a video of me flipping the caber and now all of a sudden everybody wants to like buy me drinks and they're like, "Oh my God,
Yeah.
she's a Highlander." And yeah, so
I I
it's
think that
just
is such a
oh,
flex. Like everyone listening to this, like I will put her Instagram in the show notes. Like you need to go watch some of her videos and you will just be like cuz and I think that's what was so interesting about you because it's like obviously we were there together doing a fitness shoot and we were doing like fitness training movements and holding barbells and all this stuff. But just knowing that like, oh, you train and do this stuff to be able to do this stuff, like it's just so
yeah.
cool. Like I think it's so fun. And on that note, like I had seen a video you posted on your San Diego Highland game throw, like you were setting a field record. And I loved seeing your celebration reaction at the end of the video. And I just wanted to like chat about like, let's chat about the importance of like celebrating your wins, like big and small, because like I love that you posted that and like you mentioned the dance. And I was like, yes, like we should be proud. We should be celebrating. So like, let's chat about like why is it so important to celebrate like our wins no matter what size.
I'm such a cornball. I got like chills all down my legs, but like um it, I think about every rep, you know, like the days that you don't want to train and just uh, there's been plenty of days in my garage gym, right? Because during lockdown, that's primarily like the spot where I do like all of my training. But there are just days I don't want to do it, or there's days that are hard, or you know, trying to break down the technique of one throw because competing in the women's pro class is very competitive. You know, once you climb up, it gets even harder because now you got to train hard to stay up there. And so
Yeah.
I just think about all those reps that I put in. I think about, you know, all the nights of me going to bed early, being in bed at 9, you know, because
Yeah.
sleep recovery is just as important as, you know, those hard days of training, taking care of yourself and, you know, checking in mentally, like with my therapist. And um, it's just a lot, you know, because even though this is my
Yeah.
hobby, I'm so passionate about it and I work really hard at it. So, like, man, if I get like a PR by a couple of inches, I am hooting and hollering because
Yeah.
that's my work showing, you know, and
Yeah.
I don't ever want people to think, you know, that I'm just and don't get me wrong, there are throws that people are still impressed by, and I'm not impressed, but I'll still, you know, give a wave to the crowd or, you know, try to hype it up to like
Yeah.
ham it up. But yeah, I mean, and it just comes out. It's not something that I plan or I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do this celebration. It's just I don't even know what I'm gonna do. I just get so hyped and it just like comes out because I'm like, all that work, like
Yeah.
I'm very big on visualization. So like before the throw, after like executing it, my cues, all of it, I'm thinking of that before I step into the trig or I do a throw. I'm just like right here, right? Like
Yeah.
hundreds of drills, hundreds of throwing drills, hundreds of reps. Here it is. Let's do it. And when I dial in, I get one off. I'm just like, there it is. Like it just feels
Yes.
like the most like rewarding thing that I can give to myself.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned something that is so important, and you were acknowledging every single rep that you have put in, the nights you've gone to bed early, like all these little things that people take for granted, right? We take it for granted. Like we take for granted
Hmm.
sometimes putting in the work because we're so focused on like this outcome, right? And like you kind of acknowledging the process that it takes to get there, and like you know how hard that is, and you know how much like discipline and focus it takes. So like that really is part of the win, acknowledging like I'm tired, I don't want to train, but guess what? This is going to get me closer to like where I want to be.
Absolutely. That's my biggest thing is I always tell people like don't just trust the process, of course, but also enjoy it even on the hard days. Like
Yeah.
currently right now I'm rehabbing through hip impingement surgery I had on May 30th, and
Oh, wow,
just
that's recent.
yeah, recent. But I'm good. It was
Yeah.
orthoscopic, and I'm off the crutches and feeling good,
Nice.
out of pain. And it's just taking this time, right, to like think like,
Mhm.
okay, it forced me out, but I get to rebuild, and I get to rebuild not being in pain all the time because I was just kind of pushing through it.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to it. Like I get my little PT exercises and I'm throwing on like metal bangers and treating it like it is a regular lifting session because I'm like,
Yes.
hey, this is what I can do right now
The
and I'm just gonna
mindset.
enjoy it. Yeah, you
Yes.
got to. It's really important. I always stress like your mental health and your mental outlook on it is it's gonna be it's gonna lift you even higher than what your strength can do physically.
Yeah. So I know that you are obviously your training right now looks different because you are, rehabbing post surgery, but like typically, what is your training like to be healthy and strong for throwing to be able to do your sport? Like, is it a lot of powerlifting? Is it more like bodybuilding style? Like, what is your training look like?
Right now, so like when I am training for season, I train 4 days a week lifting, very much like an Olympic lift. Wait, what, now I gotta like rethink back to it. It's it's usually like Tuesdays and Fridays I'll do like an Olympic lift, but every day every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, um, I'm doing like plyos. I'm doing core work.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
so like there is some like powerlifting static lifts, but not too many. Um,
Hmm.
it's going to be like a lot of explosive movements.
Explosive
Um,
stuff. Yeah.
yeah, but I definitely I'm not lifting heavy every day. I'm not like
Hmm.
maxing out, or I'm
Yeah.
not trying to like, get um like those big like powerlifting numbers, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um
Hmm.
Even with like deadlift is like my favorite lift. Like I love deadlifting. Any variation. Like I love deadlifts. But
Uh-huh.
now that my focus is solely on throwing Highland Games and keeping my spot in the women's pro class, I hardly ever deadlift. Like once in a
Uh-huh.
while I'll bust it out just because I love it. But most of my lifts that I'm doing are just quick, explosive, staying strong but staying fast.
Yeah. And just curious because like you are training very specifically like for throwing, is it a pretty like you're training like lower body and upper body, or do you feel like because of the throwing do you have to do more upper body, or is it still pretty balanced?
It's pretty balanced, and I would even say it's more lower body because with throwing, um, technique wise, it's we always say like try to get separation. So kind of like uh, everybody is more familiar with baseball. So you think of somebody
Hmm.
like coming up, take their swing, their batting stance, you see they load up their right leg if they're righties, right? And then when they go to
Yeah.
step out, it's like hips first and then the bat comes out. So throwing is kind of like the same way, where it's like we're loading up our right leg and our legs are going to lead the throw because our lower body is much stronger than our upper body. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, so a lot of that the frontal chain, keeping that like really strong, like front squats and cleans and all that, like I said, with the triple extensions. Um, but
Yeah. Oh,
so,
there we go. Can you hear me?
yep, sorry, it like froze.
Okay. Okay, there we go. We're good. Um, okay, no, love that. Yeah, I was just curious about your training, but like you said, like I knew last time I met you, you were talking about like lifting weights a lot. So I was like, oh yeah, she lifts definitely, and that's why you're strong. But I love that you also emphasize the importance of recovery and rest, especially because I think sometimes people think they need to overtrain when they're doing
Mm.
something like very athletic, but like the recovery is just so important. So I love that you touched on that. Um, so I have one final question that I like to ask all of my guests, and it's what advice would you share with your teenage self and teens today?
Oh, for myself, um, it is okay to show yourself love every day. It is okay to love yourself where you're at and not compare yourself to the person next to you. Stay your course, reach the goals that you want, and what your goals are yours alone to enjoy and to be excited for. So stay excited. Don't let anybody dim your light. And no matter what, I'm rooting for you.
Yes, no, I love that. And I think that is so important because sometimes, I mean, I remember as a teen too, sometimes you feel like are your goals or your parents' goals or like who's trying to take them over? And I
Yep,
think like I love
exactly.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. And for anybody who might be like interested in like looking into getting into either something like this, like a sport like this, or an activity that might be like super niche and like maybe it doesn't have a lot of women in this area yet, like what um last couple like notes or tips would you give anybody for that?
Just continue to show up, and there's always space for you. Even if that space is kind of small and uncomfortable being in it, make yourself some elbow room and be there and take up that
Yes.
space because
Yeah.
you being there is representing for somebody who wouldn't know, who wouldn't, even think like, oh, I can do
Yes.
that too, right? So, yeah, just hold that space, and I promise you, it's not going to stay uncomfortable. You're going to start, making more room and
Yes.
being comfy in it.
Yeah, no, I think that's great because I do think like, and that's why, like I said, when you shared with me what you do, it was just so fun to learn about something else that required strength and that was like a very niche sport that I had never heard of. And then I got interested and fascinated about like, ooh, like how did women break into this space? Like, what is it like now? And I know there's other sports like that. So I think that's really important for other women to hear. And I like that. It's just like take up some space, get the, just start throwing bows, whatever you got to do.
Those elbows. Excuse me.
Yes.
Yeah.
I I love that. So, how can we support you? Where can we direct people?
I'm very active on Instagram. I'm trying to be better. I know, like, since my injury, I've been like on there less. But yeah, if you want to get involved, even if you have no throwing background, even if you don't have an athletic background, I've seen, like specifically women, it just touches my heart. Like, that's never done anything athletically. They've discovered Highland Games, and now like their world is completely different. Like, they're proving to
Oh my
themselves, like,
gosh.
I would have never thought I can do this. And like,
Yeah.
a woman just told me this at one of her last competitions. She's like, I've never done anything athletically, and she won
Wow.
her class. And yeah, and she was like teary-eyed. And so it like makes me
Oh
teary-eyed. And
my
it's just, yeah,
gosh.
yeah.
Yes.
Like, and
And
it doesn't matter your age, you know.
yeah.
Hmm.
And that's why I think like these, like niche sports like this, I think are just so important because of exactly what you said. I feel like sometimes the people that find them are people who never considered themselves athletic and they got into this hobby randomly or got into this thing and they end up shining and being amazing at it.
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh, that's so awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. I have a list of like people I would love to have on and I your name was there and I appreciate you for saying yes.
Well, thank you for having me. I love what you do. Like I told you, I just absolutely admire you. It's rough out there for our teachers, so I just, my heart is to you. And, thank you for, you know, being that example, for all kids, but specifically for the girls. It's
Oh,
that's so important. I wish I didn't have that in high school. So to see it like the norm now, seeing, kids lifting, like, that's awesome.
yes. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. I cannot wait to share this episode and like brag about you to my students and just share this, new sport with them and get them hyped and interested. But thanks to everyone else for listening to the Pretty Little Lifters podcast. And I am so grateful again to you, Jarvina, for being here and for making time for this conversation. And I will share all of her information in the show notes so you can go follow her. And please go watch her amazing videos of doing all these strong things and flipping these trees because it is amazing. And I will talk to you all next episode. Bye.